I was talking about the CyberTruck explosion that happened in Las Vegas and some of the automotive context behind it. Of course, there's a lot of political stuff to be said, political motivation perhaps behind the explosion. And of course, I'm trying to be tactful because, someone has died, the guy who, orchestrated the whole thing. But let's look at what the truck did. And earlier in the last segment, I was talking about how Elon says that they are going to rebuild the truck. Yes, and he said they're not joking. They're going to take the truck, they're going to rebuild it. So, why? I guess to prove a point, to prove a marketing point that it can be done.
From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
And here we are, rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars on the weekend. Now today, I talk about the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas and how it has a local tie-in right here in Colorado Springs. Also, we're going to talk about how the EPA has approved the use of, get this, radioactive roads. Yes, roads that are radioactive, and yet they don't want you driving your classic car on those radioactive roads, because apparently that's far too dangerous. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how COVID-19, yes, that COVID-19 is affecting your diesel CP4 injection pumps. I'm dead serious, by the way. This is wild. So we're going to get to all of that and more on this edition of the Automotive ADHD Show. Of course, you've tuned into the correct car show, and now I have a little bit of sad news to start the show off with, which is a longtime Automotive ADHD affiliate, that's what we'll call them, AM 1400 KRLN, signed off on the air for the last time this week. And of course, you can still catch this show. Typically, you probably catch it on the radio in the home market here in Colorado Springs, AM 1460 and FM 101.1 The Answer, 100.7 The Word, or you do listen in the Wet Mountain Valley. Love the Wet Mountain Valley. That's where I'm from. That's 91.7 KLZR. But AM 1400 KRLN has been broadcasting since 1947. They have been around for a very, very long time. And I learned this week that the owners, it's a privately owned radio station. A lot of radio companies these days are big, very big, but that's a private kind of mom and pop owned radio station. And they decided to retire and put it up for sale and just said, hey, we'll put it up for sale. We're getting out of the business. We're retiring. You can see there's a tear in my eye coming down. No, but anyway, so they said they're retiring. And I think that, for one, of course, I'm sad to see them go, but also I fear that I may have been the cause of the demise, because I think the last show that they did add into their lineup was my show. So I don't want this to be misconstrued as, I drove them out of business, which I maybe did. So for that, I apologize. But in all seriousness, it's a very cool radio station. Some really tremendous folks who've worked there for decades, by the way. And so they're all sad to see it go. Now, hopefully, someone comes along and buys the station and revitalizes it and brings it back to its glory. I am hopeful for that. So anyway, now I was talking here in Colorado Springs to my radio station operations manager, Brett, and he asked me about his son. He has a 24-year-old son who is buying his first car. First new car, I should say. So he already has a car. It's an older vehicle, and he's been driving it around for a few years. Well, and he said that, I want to buy my very first new car. I've saved up a big chunk of change. I can either buy something outright altogether, or it can be a very big down payment on something actually really nice. And so my operations manager, Brett, here at the station asked me, well, what should we do with that? And I would say, as the resident car guy here, that for one, I love talking about new cars, but typically when it comes to buying new cars, I'm not all on board when it comes to buying brand new cars. And there's a very good reason for it, and a very simple reason. It's not a deep reason. It's just called depreciation. That's exactly what it's called. Now, so I'll get into that, but I want to pull up this article here. Comes by way of the Autopian, and the headline here says, get this, nearly 1 in 5 shoppers spent $1,000 or more on monthly payments in quarter 4 of 2024. Of course, we're in 2025 now. We can look back on the numbers from 2024 and see how much we're spending on cars. And apparently we're spending a whole lot on cars. Can you imagine that? I mean, maybe you do have one of these $1,000 or $1,000 plus car payments, because that's quickly becoming the norm. That is quickly becoming the norm on there. And thanks, Windows, for pinging me with a notification there. Anyway, so it is quickly becoming the norm with this sort of stuff. So what does that mean for the car industry? What does that mean for the car shopper? Well, firstly, a lot of these loans are $1,000 a month with fairly high interest rates. That's first and foremost. Now, some of which, Edmunds.com reports that just 2.4% of new vehicles were sold featuring 0% financing. 0% financing. If you can get that loan for basically free, that's not too bad of a deal. But at the end of the day, there's, by the way, still ways the money gets made by the bank. I mean, just because it's 0% financing doesn't mean the bank is literally giving you a free loan. They have other ways of making money off of you. But going over to Edmunds reports this as well. Now, here's the thing. The share of consumers, according to Edmunds, taking on new car loans with new monthly vehicle payments, $1,000 or more, was 18.9%. So that is an all-time high, according to Edmunds, by the way. And the average amount financed for new vehicle purchases, they say, was around $42,000, which is up from earlier in the year where it was $39,000. So cars are getting more expensive, but people are seemingly less adverse to spending that extra money on cars, on expensive new cars. And they also go on to say, further reinforcing this point, that those interest rates remain historically high, and historically high. So now the average new vehicle interest rate, it dipped. They say it remains high, but it did technically go down 6.8%, and that's compared to 7.1% a few months before then. That's still really high, though. So that brings me back to my discussion at the top of the show here about my operations manager and his son wanting to go out and buy a new car. Now, he says that he has the cash to buy a decent new car outright, which is good because you're getting away from these ridiculously expensive loans. Yeah, you're getting away from these loans that are very high. I think if you can afford to buy it outright, I would say you should. Now, financial gurus out there would say, well, actually, you should get a loan for the car and then invest the money. If you have it in cash, invest that in other markets and other places right now where you can make that money back so it's actually cheaper to do the loan. At this point, I would have to do the math, but at this point, with the interest rates the way they are, I would almost say it's not worth it to do that. Are you going to say you got 40 grand for a new car, that interest rate, 6.8%. You're going to take that 40 grand and you're going to put it in a high interest savings account that makes you 6.8%. Really? Those are like 2%. Okay, fine. You're going to go put it in the rest of the market somewhere. Well, that's a lot more volatile. Yeah, you could put it in bonds and funds and these other things, but you're not going to see that for a while. And again, that's still subject to market fluctuations. I would say, contrary to the traditional money guy advice, and bear in mind, I'm not a money guy, but I do buy cars. I would say that it almost makes more sense now. Just buy it in cash. Just buy it in cash. Now, to that point as well, I would suggest still not buying new. 15% of that car's value, that's kind of the industry standard accepted amount of depreciation that you take the second you drive it off the lot. That second that car is now a one-owner car, you drove it across the threshold at the dealership, or actually you signed the paperwork, really, and then That's when it became a one-owner car. 15%, boom, out the window. Expect another 10% trickling down to 8, down to 5 over the next few years. But that car is going to lose a tremendous amount of value in the first few years. Is it going to lose a tremendous amount of value as a car itself, as its function, as what it can do to you as the driver? No, it's not. No, not at all. So I maintain, I've said it on the show before, but I maintain that if you want that new car feel, you ought to go for certified pre-owned. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means after the break, but that, I think, is going to be your absolute best way to do that. So coming up here on Automotive ADHD, we are going to talk about COVID-19, how it's blowing up your CP4 injection pumps. We're also going to talk about that CyberTruck explosion. That's coming up right here after the break. Don't go anywhere.
So I can speak for a lot of them knowing that you will pry my 68 Mustang gear shift out of my cold, dead fingers. Now you'll back.
I'm going to keep playing that. I love that line. Oh, man. You are listening to the Automotive ADHD show. Matt West here, talking cars with you on the radio. Maybe you're catching this as well online as a podcast. We are on video, by the way. Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, all of the places where fine shows and, well, you know, this one are downloaded. And now, before the break, I was talking about certified pre-owned cars and why I think and why I recommended to my operations manager here at the radio station that his son should buy a certified pre-owned, because he says, well, look, I want to buy a new car. I want a new car. I've had used cars before. I want a new one, and I've got cash for it. And yeah, you could certainly do that. In fact, you buying a new car is why car guys like me buy used old cars to fix up at some point. Someone has to buy them new. And that's not always a bad idea. But in this case, before the break, was talking about certified pre-owned cars. And certified pre-owned cars are an interesting animal because you have, I think, a lot of opportunity with a car like that to have that feel of a new car, but without the hit of the depreciation that new car has with its first owner. Now, certified pre-owns are typically used cars, obviously. They are legitimately 100% used cars. Yes, they are. But they are oftentimes, and now I will say, I'll preface this by saying your certified pre-owned program at whatever dealership you have, whatever manufacturer you're looking for, that can vary. Mileage can vary on that in terms of the terms of that and how they do the inspection and how they do the warranties on that. So I won't get into the weeds on specifics there because you're just going to have to check around and see who does what. But generally speaking, these are going to be cars that have not a whole lot of miles on them. They're typically cars that were probably lease turn-ins at some point from a former lease. So they keep them under a certain mileage threshold. Then when that car comes in, they go through actually a pretty decent inspection. Now, you know, dealerships always like to say, our 600-point inspection. Yeah, sure. You know, the technician is he's flying through that inspection. He's just hoping to get on to the next one. But generally, the certified pre-owned cars, though, are going to have a top-to-bottom inspection. They're going to look at stuff. They're going to address things like brake pad wear. They're going to address consumables, stuff like that, and replace those if they need to be replaced. And then they're going to take that. They're going to put it on the lot. They're going to sell it as a certified pre-owned. It's been inspected. But that certified pre-owned also comes usually with a guarantee from the manufacturer still. It comes not only with a warranty. Way back in college, I worked for Pikes Peak Acura, selling cars. I was terrible at selling cars, by the way. I'm much better at talking about them on the radio than I am actually selling them. Also evidenced by my fleet of cars. I buy them, I don't sell them. I just start accumulating them. But what the certified pre-owned program, if memory serves now, this has been a long time, but if memory serves, what we had done was the CPO cars actually had, certified pre-owned, had a better warranty. If you actually looked through the warranty, they actually had a better warranty in terms of the drivetrain and things like that than the new cars did. And again, your mileage is going to vary manufacturer to manufacturer, but a lot of times you'll see these certified pre-owned cars because they've had this extra inspection, especially because they've had a number of other things done to them over the first few years of ownership. You know, things like recalls and things like that have all been taken care of at this point. Not that affects your warranty status, but it's a proven variable. The car is a proven variable at this point. All the little bugs have been worked out of it. So they generally seem to warranty these for longer. So you get a car that's cheaper. You get a car that's had a nice, thorough inspection on it, and it's only, 3 years old, 4 years old? It might even be a current model still, that they're still selling that generation, that model of that car in the same way. So if you want that new car feel, you want to roll up somewhere and have people see you driving a new car, okay, they're not going to know if it's 3 years old, especially if it's a current model that they haven't updated yet. Same as the new one. So that, I think, is the best way to go. I think in terms of depreciation, in terms of all of that, and in terms of peace of mind, because people who buy new cars oftentimes tell me, well, yeah, I don't want an old crappy car like all of yours. I want one that actually runs and I can count on it to take me to work every day. That's why I want to buy new. Great point. Certified pre-owned. You have that same peace of mind. It's just technically you weren't the first person in the seat of that car. But God, I mean, a lot of these have low miles still. I mean, they're going to be under 20,000 miles, a lot of them. So, I mean, is a 15,000 mile car not a new car to you? Or can you tell the difference between that and a 0 mile car? Not really. Like, really, for what really counts? Not really. So that would be my official recommendation. And that's what I told the operations manager. I said, well, hey, if your son's dead set on a new car, some people just are. And if he's got cash in hand and doesn't want to take out a stupid loan for it, $1,000 a month loan like I was just talking about, yeah, go for it. But if he's wanting that new car feel, but he's not necessarily married to the idea of, I want to be the first person to sit in this car, which you're really not. The dealership and the other people test drove it before you. They did. And by the way, I believe, what is it here in Colorado? It's like 300 miles, something like that. You can have 300 miles on a car and it's still technically a new car. That accounts for dealership test drives and transport and all of that. So anyway, so that's what I would recommend. And if his son's dead set on it, go for it. Get that new car and enjoy it. But just know that if you want that new car feel without the initial hit on that depreciation, yeah, sure, the car's still going to depreciate over the next 5 years, 10 years. It's eventually going to depreciate into nothingness, unless it's a Toyota, because people seem to ask $1 million for those 40 years later. But it's still going to depreciate, but it's not going to depreciate a huge amount. That initial hit, you're going to be fine on. So that's what I would say. Go get a CPO car. Go get a CPO car, especially if you've got one in mind. It's a current model. Go test drive them. You can even go test drive a new car on the lot. Maybe they don't have a certified pre-owned of the model you want at that dealership. You can go test drive the new version of that car. Again, if it's the same model and hasn't changed, and then figure out if you actually like it, and then go find another dealership who can get you a certified pre-owned or ship it in, buy it out of state. There's a lot of great options there that can save you a lot of money. So now I promised I would talk a little bit about this Cybertruck explosion, which you may have heard about. I'm sure you've heard about it at this point. It was making national news headlines pretty much all week here since it happened. And I'm going to approach this story from more of an automotive perspective, because this right now has a certain political lean to it. It really does. It's thought that the guy who conducted the explosion of the truck, and by the way, killed himself in the process. I believe he killed himself before then, and then the truck exploded. It's a sad story. It's a sad story. And it has a certain political view to it. It's a Cybertruck in front of Trump Tower. You have Elon and Trump working together. And, yeah, I could get into the politics of that. I could get into that. But this is a car show, and you'll probably, if you listen to this station regularly, probably hear me on the radio during the weekdays getting into some of the political stuff. So, but what I want to talk about specifically is the way the actual vehicle handled that explosion, which is interesting. From an automotive perspective, it is very interesting, because what you have is the Cybertruck, which actually handled this explosion remarkably well. In fact, Elon Musk here has even said that Cybertruck may be the reason why more people weren't injured in this instance here. And even crazier now, Elon is saying that they're going to get that Cybertruck back on the road. I don't know if you've seen pictures of this. I have a feeling you probably don't want to see pictures of it. It is a little gruesome in some ways. But Elon Musk, this comes by way of Fox News, who reports that Elon said, quote, "The battery pack never even caught fire and the tires are still inflated. Once we get this Cybertruck back to Tesla, will buff out the scratches and get it back on the road. And then users on Twitter, X Twitter, sounds dirty when you say it that way, but the users there said that surely, Elon, you jest. You must be joking. And he goes, no, I mean it. So that, for one, is interesting to see the state of this truck and to see that they're going to try to rebuild that. That's interesting. Now, Elon also said on X Twitter that the CyberTruck, quote, the CyberTruck is the worst possible choice for a car bomb, as its stainless steel armor will contain the blast better than any other commercial vehicle. Now, we love to clown on the Cybertruck. I mean, look, my favorite dumpsters say Cybertruck on them. But I will give the engineering credit where credit is due. The Cybertruck, for all of its quirks, for all of the cultural connotations that it has, it is culturally the Hummer of this generation now. I mean, people make fun of it in the same way they made fun of Hummers in the past. And they don't actually make fun of the new Hummer, like the EV Hummer, which is big and heavy. It's like 10,000 pounds. They're not making fun of that one. But the Cybertruck is just everyone's favorite thing to hate on at the moment. So what does that mean for this? Well, I think it means that, for one, the Cybertruck, I've said before on the show, is engineered well in a way. And by well, I don't mean like, Edison Motors level of right to repair well, ease of repairability, ease of parts accessibility. None of that. It doesn't have any of that. I would prefer if it had that. But from a structural standpoint, yeah, they've put this is a structurally strong vehicle. There's questions about the suspension. Those control arms look kind of dainty and real dainty, but it is structurally a strong vehicle, and that is proven here in this case. That is absolutely proven. The bed of this Cybertruck, I was going to say a fire truck. Well, it was on fire. And the bed of this vehicle was filled with gas tanks, camping fuel, firework mortars that were all connected to a detonation system. And the whole truck, it went up in flames. Now, it's thought that the driver, who was a decorated Army veteran, Special Forces guy, it's thought that he shot himself before the truck exploded. But what's weird about this whole scenario, too, is that the guy was from Colorado Springs. I mean, this is making national news headlines. I'm sitting right here in Colorado Springs this morning, actually, in the garage studio through the magic of technology. But I'm here in Colorado Springs. It's always weird when you hear your hometown getting mentioned in national news stories, every hour, right? But there was a connection to that. And it's also been said that the vehicle was possibly rented as well. So did he rent it here and then drive it there? I don't know, but we'll continue this discussion into the other segment here. You are listening to the Automotive ADHD show, of course. I am Matt West, and we'll continue into this, and we'll talk about radioactive roads and CP4 diesel injection pumps catching COVID-19. Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. Stay right here on Automotive ADHD.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
Man, you gotta love a good RB26. That's a Skyline GTR R33 there. Hector's car, by the way, playing that one again from last week. And remember, you can send your car sounds into my show and have them featured here on the show. Facebook.com/Automotive ADHD is the place to do it. There's a pinned post on the Facebook page. You can send it there and post it in the comments. And when you do that, everyone else gets to see it too, which is pretty cool. Or if you want to be shy about it, you can private message it to me as well. But just know I'm going to play it on the radio and I'm going to post it up anyway. So all the same difference there. Of course, you are listening to the Automotive ADHD show. And before the break, I was talking about the Cybertruck explosion that happened in Las Vegas and some of the automotive context behind it. Of course, there's a lot of political stuff to be said, political motivation perhaps behind the explosion. And of course, I'm trying to be tactful because someone has died, the guy who, orchestrated the whole thing. But let's look at what the truck did. And earlier in the last segment, I was talking about how Elon says that they are going to rebuild the truck. Yes, and he said they're not joking. They're going to take the truck, they're going to rebuild it. So why? I guess to prove a point, to prove a marketing point that it can be done, to prove that the structure of the CyberTruck is that where it can be rebuilt. Now, if you've seen pictures of this, this truck is, completely. What's interesting is you see and I'm explaining it for the listeners on radio, but the body of the truck is in good shape. Like the stainless steel part, that's all good. Like you can see that, that's not a problem. Looks fine. The tires are even inflated. Does look like the truck is sagged down a bit, so probably the air ride suspension has deflated and the truck is now sitting lower. But aside from that, yeah, it looks like it's there. Now, Elon Musk saying that this vehicle, this was the wrong vehicle of choice for this type of incident. I think in a way it was for sure. It was done for attention. It was done in a Cybertruck in front of Trump Tower. That's fairly obvious. But with that, was what was the Cybertruck? Was the structural soundness of the vehicle actually? Did it contribute to no one else being seriously injured or killed? Now it does sound like, as of doing this, that there were a number of injuries, regardless. Still, but those are going to be early numbers there. And I think it does lend some importance to let a news story flush out a bit before you go too far into it, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're doing a car show like I'm doing or anything else. Because, initially people were saying in this story that, the Cybertruck blew up because it's an EV and all EVs explode. Yes, all EVs definitely explode. I've joked about that before on the show. What if you made a Ford Pinto? What if you brought that back as an EV? Imagine that. That you would think about it and the car would just explode. That's how easily that would explode. But no, realistically, what happened here, this was definitely set up. So people said, okay, it's an EV, it blew up. All right, that's like the first media frenzy. No, it was loaded with explosives. That's why it blew up. And Elon Musk went on to say that Tesla did some checking into it and said that the telemetry on the vehicle was reporting as normal before the vehicle exploded. Now, albeit handy in this case that they have that ability to check on the telemetry of your vehicle to say, yes, it was normal before it exploded. That's very kind of them to do that. Also a little creepy, I'll add. Just the fact that they can do that in the first place it's kind of weird. It's a little weird, in my opinion. My 40-year-old Corolla is not necessarily going to rat me out in any way, shape, or form. But I will say in this case, that proved useful, and I'm sure the investigators and the police and the law enforcement looking into this are going to be reviewing that telemetry data again just to confirm that. But the vehicle, they say, because of its design, it funneled that explosion upwards and out, up the top, and instead of out the sides. And you can see that looking at the pictures of this. You can absolutely see that. The glass roof of the truck, gone. All the windows, gone. But the stainless steel body is intact. And credit where credit's due. Tesla does a good amount of... Tesla does a nice amount of engineering when it comes to things. They talk about their gigacasting, for example, and how much stronger it is when they do these gigacasting, structures than a traditional, like a body on frame or a traditional unibody even, welded structure. So it is easy to see why this perhaps saved some lives. So there is some engineering that goes into there. Am I a Tesla fanboy? No. I really think Tesla, look, if Tesla brought on the right to repair aspect that we've come to love out of Edison Motors, that would be amazing. If you could just get parts for it anywhere, if you could have parts interchangeability, some open sourceness to it, that would be incredible. That's one of my biggest problems with EVs. That's one of my biggest problems is not only are you buying a glorified golf cart, but you're also buying into a computer and appliance on wheels, no doubt with some pre-planned obsolescence built into it. Now, this applies even to gas cars, modern gas cars, all of the technology, all of the electronics in there. seems the more complication you add to it, the more potential you seem to have for failure. More complexity tends to lead to more failure. Yeah, that more complexity leads to more creature comforts and niceties and software updates, but it just leads to, in my mind, more points of failure. So I think if you were a company and you came along and said, hey, we want to make a electric car, but it's going to be bare bones. It is going to be ultra bare bones. It's going to have like manual crank windows. It's just going to be car. Just car. That's it. That's all it does. There's no tablet in the center screen. There's no tablet in the center screen. There's no center screen. And there's none of that. And it's just a car. Think like a 1999 Toyota Corolla, but with an electric drivetrain. Think that, right? If you did that and you made it affordable, you made it sub $30,000, sub 30, not sub 40, sub 30, new. And then you get one certified pre-owned, like I was opening up the show with. Get one certified pre-owned that's 3 years old for like 15 grand. Like, that's a great deal. That is a tremendous deal, right? But none of them are going to do that. None of them are going to do that. If Tesla did that, that would be great. But Tesla's, in my mind, is just adding more complexity. I commend Tesla on being a supporter, though, of American industry, American manufacturing, and American jobs. We need that. Tesla's making a lot of stuff in the United States, whereas Ford, Chevy, Dodge, Mexico. Yeah, Mexico. That totally, right? That says a lot right there. So, speaking of Mexican-made Fords, I need to talk a little bit about how diesel CP4 injection pumps are catching COVID-19. Yeah, this is a real thing. COVID-19, isn't it 2025 now? Wasn't that a few years ago? It's crazy, but this comes by way of Byron Hurd from The Drive, and this is just, this has me shaking my head here, but Ford is recalling nearly 300,000 Super Duty and medium duty trucks due to complications stemming from, and he says we can't make this up, the COVID-19 pandemic. So these trucks, shipped with 6.7 liter diesel engines equipped with high pressure fuel pumps that are sensitive to deposits found in biodiesel that has sat too long. Do you see where this is going? And so during COVID-19, the supply chain got hopelessly interrupted. In fact, you know, you look at metrics now, I don't have them in front of me, but you hear about things now. Stuff still, it's 2025, and we're still not back to where we ought to be in a lot of industries, a whole lot of industries, right? People are like, we're back from COVID. Well, in a lot of ways, we're not where we would have been had that not happened in the first place. So we're going to talk about how exactly the old diesel that's in the supply chain now is affecting these, what you can do if you have one of these trucks, and I think we'll talk about how the EPA has just greenlit a radioactive road. Yeah, the road is radioactive, legitimately. So we're going to get into all of that. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD Show. I'm Matt West. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break.
When you can drive a truck as tough as Jeep, why drive anything else?
Why drive just a truck?
When Jeep gives you a durability record that even Ford, Chevy, and Dodge can't match.
Don't worry, lady, the Jeep's okay.
Why drive just a truck?
When you can get a new Scrambler for just $67.65, the lowest price 4x4 pickup you can buy.
Why drive just a truck? When you can drive a Jeep.
Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
An encore presentation of Brian Seth Hunter's 1965 Ford Falcon. He's been working on that with his dad, by the way, and last week he sent me that video showing some awesome progress on there, so I think that deserves a repeat on the show as well. And you gotta love a father-son project wrenching on cars. That's how a lot of folks, that's how a lot of us got started, that's how a lot of us developed a love for wrenching on cars and all things automotive. Of course, you can send those car sounds into the show, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. Have them featured right here on the radio as well as on the podcast. You can catch this show in all sorts of great places and on video now, too. And I'm doing the show this morning from the garage studio, which, again, is a tremendous feat of technology. I actually cleaned the studio up here enough. And you can see my S2000 behind me if you're watching on the video with the K24 engine sitting nicely in it and a bunch of tools stacked up on the cowl right now. Don't worry about those. I talked a few weeks ago about how I've lost some tools, and it happens at times. Did you see, though, that Harbor Freight, now I thought this was an April Fool's joke. Harbor Freight has and it's not. It's absolutely not. It's real. They have the 10 millimeter care package, and it's just a box of only 10 millimeter sockets, but it's got, half-inch drive, 3/8 drive, quarter-inch drive. It's got 12-point, 6-point. It's got all sorts of stuff, long, short. It's cool. I think I'm going to start sending some of those out with the Automotive ADHD care packages, we'll say. So, anyway, before the break, I was talking about I was talking about diesel CP4 injection pumps. Now, bear in mind, I'm not the biggest diesel guy in the world, but the thing with diesels and modern diesels especially is you have these very high pressure fuel systems. They are very high pressure. And when things go wrong in these fuel systems, they go really wrong. And replacing all of your fuel system, replacing the lines, the pump, the injectors can be $10,000, if not more, on some of these new trucks. And if you have a heavy-duty diesel and you've had to do some sort of significant maintenance on it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Diesel stuff is not cheap, and a lot of times the whole cab has to come off of these trucks to actually work on them properly. I mean, it is a chore in many ways. But I was saying that COVID-19 affects these. COVID-19 is affecting these pumps, and not directly. It's not that the pumps are actually catching COVID-19. It's not that that's happening, but it is because of the supply chain stuff. And this recall, by the way, affects 2020 to 2022 Ford F-Series Super Duty, medium duty trucks. So that's your F-250s, 350, 450, 550, and 600s, specifically with the 6.7 liter Power Stroke diesel. And Ford says that deposits from the fuel that has sat around, the biodiesel that's deteriorated slightly because of the whole supply chain domino effect that we're still reeling from with COVID 5 years later now. 5 years later, it's 2025 now. I can't believe it's 2025. I'm still messing that up when I'm writing dates down, by the way. But anyway, I'll learn. Give me until 2026. I'll have it figured out. So, but Ford says that deposits form on the pump drivetrain roller and inside the tappet body cooling passages, and they increase wear on the pump components and introduce debris into the fuel system. Again, like I said, with these high pressure, very, very high pressure fuel pumps, like your gas car might have a fuel pump or fuel system. It might be like 40 PSI, right? Maybe 40 to 60, depending on what you're doing. We're talking like hundreds of PSI in these diesel injection systems. And when you start introducing that pressure and you start getting some metal shavings in there, it's easy to see how delicate high pressure injection pump parts can become damaged and then introduce more pieces of metal into the entire system. And they say that basically the pumps are failing. And now the question is this because of the typical infamous Bosch CP4 high pressure fuel pump failures? Well, those, by the way, if you're a diesel guy, you might be familiar with that CP4 pump, the dreaded Bosch CP4 pump, and they fail on all sorts of stuff. And they use that fuel pump in a lot of applications, and it's not just Ford that uses them. I believe even Duramax guys, Chevy guys have issues with CP4 pumps and stuff. So, and that's because it's Bosch. When you look at like car manufacturers, like Ford doesn't make the fuel pumps, like Chevy doesn't make the fuel pumps, or like even in your gas car, great example. Your fuel injectors are often going to be Bosch built ones. The ignition coil packs are Denso. These spark plugs, NGK, right? Like, manufacturers don't make every component. They get them from other places. And a lot of times, Ford, Chevy, and Dodge are getting parts from the same people. So then you have the same problem all across the industry. And this is absolutely, Ford says they suspected bad CP4, Bosch CP4 injection pumps, but it was worse. It wasn't just the injection pumps failing because of poor design. It was that they were poorly designed, and now they're not handling the somewhat contaminated fuel that is out and about right now. So, you know, this is one of those things that I think makes, I think that this makes people leery of heavy-duty diesels. I think this absolutely does. So, because you just look at the maintenance cost on these. I mean, it's through the roof. Now, granted, I probably have some bias being a guy who, you know, talks about cars and does car stuff all the time. So when people talk about issues, I hear them more. So I probably have a little bit of bias if I hear about issues more. So it makes the problem seem more widespread than it is. But man, everyone I know with a diesel has had some sort of significant major service that has had to happen, some sort of repair, some sort of failure that has occurred within like 100,000 miles now. And even that, oh, well, this failed at 150,000. It was $10,000 to repair it. Holy cow, that's ridiculous. I mean, really, when you look at the rest of the industry, modern cars doing 150,000, 200,000, 300,000 miles with relatively few failures now, we have gotten to a point of engineering where that is possible. And I think, hear me out, this is only going to steer people more towards EVs, really, because EVs have virtually no maintenance. If you want to hear Brian's thoughts on the show, who, of course, Brian, former mechanic of the Automotive ADHD show, now since exiled because he purchased an EV Volvo. There's no maintenance on these things. There's not. Yeah, you're going to have electronics failures, probably, maybe interior failures and stuff. But like an electric motor with a battery pack, there's no freaking maintenance. It's just not there. So, you know, I think the other issue too, of course, we have diesel emission stuff that goes on. I mean, we have the emissions requirements are wild for diesels. And when you compare them to other European countries, still, it's nuts. I mean, you look at the way our exhaust gas recirculation valves. Basically, you take hot gas coming out the exhaust and you funnel some of it back into the intake because that helps with carbon and things being emitted into the atmosphere. Well, all that carbon that would be going out the exhaust is now being put back into the intake, where carbon doesn't belong, by the way. I should add that. Carbon does not belong in your intake. It doesn't belong in those places, especially now that we've also introduced direct injection. So you no longer have fuel injectors squirting gas at the back of those intake valves, cleaning some of that carbon off. You don't have any of that. Now, that doesn't as much apply to a diesel, which is going to be direct injection anyway. But my point is, you have these emissions requirements. You've got the EGRs. You've got all these different things. And people have griped about emission stuff for forever. And we're going to gripe about that more in a bonus edition of the show here, because I'm noticing I've only got like 2 minutes left here on the radio, because we're going to talk about radioactive roads and how the EPA is doing some wild stuff with that, because they don't want you to have classic cars, but they want you to drive on now radioactive roads that are just straight up radioactive and emit radon gas on top of that. That sounds like a great idea. Great idea. But you know, this is the same EPA, though, that also, if you have a government vehicle, if you ever seen these government diesel trucks, like these heavy-duty Ford trucks, but being used by the military, being used by that, because they use those all the time, they are emissions exempt. Interesting how that works, isn't it? Oh, well, these need to be more reliable because it's the military, but you can't have that. In Europe, apparently, Scania, diesel truck manufacturers, figured out how to make a diesel without the emission stuff just work and still meet the same emissions requirements. That's interesting. So, hey, you're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. Going to talk to you on the bonus edition of the show. So right after this, go over to the podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you on the radio next week.